is your girl Wakeji Kamore, and welcome to Reflections by Wakeji Kamore. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I do hope that you're having a fantastic day wherever it is that you are. If you're here for the very first time, karibu sana, sit, relax, because these videos come to you every single day from Monday to Friday at 6 a.m. If today is not your first day, you're a returning subscriber, you're a returning listener or watcher, thank you so very much, and I do appreciate the fact that you've come back, and I appreciate the fact that you have supported me in this. Please remember to like, to subscribe, to comment, and most importantly, to share this video with someone else. So today we are going to be covering Deuteronomy chapter 14, and Deuteronomy chapter 14 is where Moses reminds the Israelites what they are allowed to eat, what they are not allowed to eat, and also reminds them about tithing. Again, I'm going to be reading this chapter word for word from the New Living Translation, so follow through, kindly follow through, so that we can see what the word is going to tell us today. This verse has a lot of, don't eat this, what, but it's a short chapter, so kindly stay glued to your screen and also just listen, man, listen. All right, so this is what it says. Since you are the people of the Lord your God, never cut yourself or shave your hair above your forehead in the morning for the dead. Like, don't cut your hair above your forehead. I don't know why there's need for me to explain that, but yeah. I think it's because I'm like inside my head, I'm actually bald. So I'm just like, what? Me, I've already like need this law. Like, what? I thank you for grace and I thank you for Jesus Christ. Because me, if this was what we were going by, we're doing very well. Anyway, let me repeat that. Since you are the people of the Lord your God, never cut yourself or shave your head above your forehead in the morning for the dead. You have been set apart as holy to the Lord your God. You have been chosen from all the nations of the earth to be his own special treasure. You must not eat any detestable animals that are ceremoniously unclean. These are the animals you must eat. You must eat the ox, the sheep, the goat, the deer, the gazelle, the roe. I don't know what the roe deer is. Roe, R-O-E. Roe, deer, the wild goat, the addax, the antelope, and the mountain sheep. You may eat any animal that has completely split hooves and chews cud. But if any animal doesn't have both, it may not be eaten. So you may not eat the camel, the hare, even the hare. Hare is sungura. I know we've eaten sunguras. Okay. You're living in the New Testament. You might not eat the hyrax. I don't know what a hyrax is. That's H-Y-R-A-X. I don't know what that is. They chew the cud but do not have split hooves. So they are ceremoniously unclean for you. And you must not eat the pig. See where that has come from? Where that usually comes from? You must not eat the pig. It has split hooves but does not chew the cud. So it is ceremoniously unclean for you. You may not eat the meat of these animals or even touch their carcasses. Of all the marine animals, you may eat whatever has both fins and scales. You may not, however, eat marine animals that do not have both fins and scales. I'm thinking about omena, and I'm just like, does it have fins? Does it? Anyway, they're ceremoniously unclean for you. You may eat any bird that is ceremoniously clean. These are the birds you may not eat: the griffon, don't even know what that is, the green-formed vulture, the bearded vulture, the black vulture, the kite, the falcon, the buzzards of all kinds, ravens of all kinds, the eagle owl, like O-W-L, owl. The short-eared owl, the seagulls, the hawks of all kinds, the little owl, the great owl, and the barn owl, the desert owl, and the Egyptian vulture, the cormorant, I don't know what that is, the stork, herons of all kinds, the hoopie, and the bat. You see, there's a guy who, this reminds me, there's a guy who ate a bat for content creations and rings didn't go. Things didn't go well. Anyway, okay, God help me to finish this chapter. All winged insects that walk around the ground are ceremoniously unclean for you, and you may not eat them. People were eating insects. But you may eat any winged bird or insect. Okay, there are winged insects that you can eat these are ceremoniously clean. You must not eat anything that has died a natural death. Oh wow. You may give it to a foreigner living in your town, or you may sell it to a stranger, but do not eat it yourself, for you are set apart as holy to the Lord your God. You must not cook a young goat in its mother's milk. That's the part for animals, clean ones and unclean ones. And the next part of this chapter we're going to is the giving of tithe. This chapter about giving tithes. Let me just say, I know I've read the animals that should be eaten and shouldn't be eaten, but please guys, remember, there's a New Testament. The New Testament, it means that we are not under this law anymore, but we are under grace. So we don't have to follow these laws word for word. We have to follow the principle, not the laws word for word. Anyway, let me get to that. Let me get to finish this chapter. It's actually pretty short. That's why I'm interjecting, because I know it's short. You must set aside a tithe of your crops, a tenth of all the crops you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, and eat it there in his presence. This applies to your tithes of grain, new wine, olive oil, and the firstborn males of your flocks and herd. Doing this will teach you always to fear the Lord your God. Now, when the Lord your God blesses you with good harvest, the place of worship he chooses for his name to be honored might be too far for you to bring the tithe. If so, you may sell the tithe portion of your crops and herds and put the money in a pouch and go to the place the Lord your God has chosen. When you arrive, you may use the money to buy any kind of food you want: cattle, sheep, goats, wine, and other alcoholic drinks. Then feast there in the presence of the Lord your God and celebrate with your household. And do not neglect the Levites in your town, for they will receive no allotment of land among you. At the end of every third year, bring you the entire tithe of that year's harvest and store it in the nearest town. Give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as the foreigners living among you, and the orphans and the widow in your town, so that they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord your God will bless you in all your work. All right. That's when nimesema vitu mingi about the food. It's so easy to say these are the laws that you shouldn't follow because they're hard to follow. And then now the ones that are just like, we don't want to even do those things. Now we decide we're not going to do them. So many times when we come to these chapters, especially in the Old Testament, like Deuteronomy chapter 14, we scratch our heads and wonder what to make of these regulations in the day that we live in today. But the New Testament is clear about that the fact that we are no longer under these laws, but we are under grace. So what about tithing? I've talked about the food and the animals and all that, made fun of them and all that. So what about tithing? Let's talk about tithing. This is a topic that most people don't want to talk about, but I think to myself, if I don't, who will talk about it? You see, the thing is, if we teach tithing as a rule, if we teach it as a rule, then all the other kinds of, Old Testament laws, we should make them into a rule. If we have to teach tithing as a rule, then we have to take all the other Old Testament things, and now we can't eat. I don't even know what I want to eat that is in that list. I'm like, do I want to eat an owl? Do I want to eat a bat? I don't even eat seafood. Like, I'm just like, we now need to take all those other laws of don't shave your head or don't wear clothes that have, there's a law in the Old Testament about not wearing clothes that are two different materials, two different fabrics. So now you can't wear a polyester cotton t-shirt because you have decided we're going to take that as a rule. So if we take some as a rule, we have to take all as a rule. And man, there are so many. Not that I'm not saying that I don't advocate for tithing. I do advocate for tithing. I just don't advocate for it as a rule that should bind a Christian. I don't advocate of it as a rule that is binding to a Christian. However, it is a great, great, great practice. It has many rewards, and we should practice it as a principle, not as a rule. We should practice it as a principle. There are many aspects of how the Israelites used to tithe that was specific for their culture and for their situation. For example, they used to tithe wine, they used to tithe, harvest, because they were farmers. I don't know whether how many people are farmers. I know I'm not, and I know I'm not going to become one because I was wounded by farming. But anyway, there's a broader principle that carries on before even the laws were laid out and even after. Because we see that tithing actually happened all the way in Genesis. There's a part in Genesis where Abraham offered a tithe to a high priest called Melchizedek. I think he's called Melchizedek. So yes, tithing was there before even the laws that have been laid out, and it was there even after the laws have been laid out. So it means that there's a broader principle that carries itself about tithing. So let's talk about the principle of tithing. What is the principle of tithing? As picked from this chapter that we have read, Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 22. Ndio msiseme ati nimesema watu wasitithe. I'm not saying people shouldn't tithe. I'm just saying it is not a rule that is bounding you, that should bound you as a Christian. We should all practice. It's a great practice, and it should be practiced as a principle. All right, so let me just read what he says in chapter, okay, of course, this chapter that we have read in verse 22. This is what it says. You must set aside a tithe of your crops, and one tenth of all the crops that you harvest each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship, the place the Lord your God chooses for his name to be honored, and eat it there in his presence. So why am I reading this verse? I'm reading this verse so that we can get the principles of tithing, so that then we can practice these principles. All right, so that's verse 22. Let me just read it again. It says we must set aside a tithe of our crops, one tenth of all the crops that we harvest each year. So there's one tenth, there's each year. Bring this tithe to the designated place of worship. Those are three principles already. It's a tenth, it's each year, it's a designated place of worship, and then the place of worship that the Lord chooses for his name to be honored, and eat it there in his presence. And then let me jump to verse 29. It says, give it to the Levites, who will receive no allotment of land among you, as well as to the foreigners living among you, the orphans, the widows in your town, so that they can eat and be satisfied. Then the Lord your God will bless all your work. From these verses and the entire chapter of Deuteronomy chapter 14, we can pick 7 different principles of tithing. I know this video is a bit longer than the usual, but let's just keep at it until we learn the seven principles. I'm going to go through them real quick. Number 1, if at least give 10%. It is clear, it says 1/10 of all your crops that you harvest that year. So it is 10%. Number 2, the second principle is give it regularly. You see, for the Israelites, yearly made sense because of the source of the income that they were using. They were farmers, so they were giving their harvest. So in a year, I don't know how many seasons are there. I don't know how long olives take to grow. I don't know how much, wheat takes to grow, but that is why they were using the regularity of yearly. So how many times are you harvesting in a year? I don't know what it is that you do and what your source of income is, but how many times are you receiving it in a year? You're probably receiving it every month. You're probably receiving it every week. You're probably receiving it after, people in business, sometimes it's not necessarily like very planned out, but the regularity must be there. Give it regularly. As soon as you receive that harvest, as soon as you receive that income, that is when we are to give it. And then give it as designated place of worship. You see, the thing is, for the Israelites, this instruction was to tithe at the temple, because the Levites, remember, the Levites were the tribe that were chosen by God to be priests. These Levites were not going to inherit any piece of land in the promised land. So now, what will they eat? They were not going to inherit anything. So the tithe was supposed to be their livelihoods. All right, so let's look at it in our modern day. In most churches today, or at least the ones I have attended, I know that the full-time employed pastors get their salaries from these tithes given. So it depends with the place of worship that you go to. But the principle is to give it at a designated place of worship, so that the people who work in that place of worship, so that the ministry of God can actually grow and people can get their livelihoods from that. Number 4, give it in celebration with others. I don't know whether we actually do this, but I know people who do this. Tithing was not something that was to be put in an envelope and then given like that was not necessarily what tithing was for Israel. It was a feast. Like people would actually feast together, celebrate with others about what God had blessed them with. This reminds me of my friend's family. One of my friends' family hold a Thanksgiving every single year in their church, and they call people, and there's a whole Thanksgiving in the church where they present a gift to the church, and then after the service is a full feast at their home. We just go and eat and just celebrate the goodness of the Lord and just be together and just be in that way. And for me, that is the way to do it. That is amazing. I like the fact that Thanksgiving and feasting and fellowship was actually what tithing was about. Number 5, give while acknowledging God's provision. Give while acknowledging God's provision. Even as you're giving that tithe, acknowledge that this money that I'm giving, or this whatever it is that you're giving, this tithe that I'm giving is out of the provision of God. It's out of a blessing that God has given me. It's out of an income because God has blessed me in that way. So give as an acknowledgement of God's provision. Number 6, give in support of the needy. The Bible actually says that the reason why they were to feast with the people is so that the foreigners that were living among them, the orphans that were there, the widows, and even the Levites could eat and be satisfied. It was basically about supporting the needy, people who don't have the shambas to actually harvest from, people who are foreigners, people who are orphans, people who are widows, like people who are actually needy. Tithing was about giving to the needy. Number 7, give with expectation of a blessing. I know this. People have said, you shouldn't give and expect to be blessed. Me, I don't agree with that perspective at all. This is what I say. Nobody goes to the farm and plants a seed and does not expect it to germinate and to grow and to mature into fruit. There's nothing wrong to stay in expectation of God's blessing, because first, God is not a man. It's not like those things of, you should write your expectations so that you're not disappointed. This is God we're talking about. He never fails. If he says he's going to bless you when you tithe, imagine, he even says in the word, test me in this. This is the one thing that God says, trust me in your tithe and see if I will not open the floodgates of heaven and give you so much blessings that you cannot contain. So what is wrong with staying in expectation and giving in expectation of a blessing? I don't see anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with expecting a blessing from the Lord and having expectations of the Lord. As a matter of fact, that is basically what faith is about. Expecting is hoping for something and trusting God that he will actually do it. And this is a God who doesn't disappoint. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with giving with an expectation of a blessing. So instead of overthinking about tithing, because tithe can make you overthink. And even for me as a business person, I have really overthought tithing. I'm like, so I should tithe after I pay my courier guy or before, or like, instead of overthinking tithing, practice the 7 principles of tithing and practice them regularly. This is your girl Wakeji Kamore, and this has been Reflections by Wakeji Kamore.